Yeah, good evening. Welcome to our Friday night Bible study, and this is for Friday, October 24. Yes, 24, 2025. Now, since it's 24th and October is a 31-day month, we do have one more Friday night in October. That'll be the 31st. Um, just calendar details there. And yes, we did get started with our pre-show music a little bit late. Um, Schedules don't always flow like they're supposed to, and we got unavoidably detained on that. So things should be okay for the rest of the evening, but stuff happens, so you live with it. It is officially now, in terms of the weather, fall. We switched our environmental controls unit from air conditioning to heat early this week, and it's been on heat all week ever since then. So we were aware last week that we were expecting cooler weather come Monday, and come Monday we had cooler weather. So um, that did kind of take place. Now, on the normal schedule that I had established this summer, this week would have been the week to mow the lawn, but instead I had a doctor's appointment for my annual Medicare wellness visit, and so I went in for that, and the lawn didn't really need it. Now, there's a possibility that I will need to make one more pass over the lawn this calendar year before winter fully takes over and I don't need to do it for a while, but I was able to skip it this week, so we'll see how that gets along and goes along. I did want to address something from the music that we did get in this evening. We did play through one verse of the song. Well, what's the title? Let me look it up in this book real quick. I remember the melody name better, so if I look it up that way, maybe I can find it in here and give you the actual hymn title, and then I can read you the words that yes. Oh, worship the King. Music from William Gardner's Sacred Melodies in 1815, words by Robert Grant, 1833. Now, the first verse, pretty straightforward. O worship the King, all glorious above. O gratefully sing his wonderful love. Our shield and defender, the Ancient of Days, pavilioned in splendor and girded with praise. Okay, nothing to be concerned about with that verse. But the next verse is going to throw us a curveball. Listen. O tell of his might, O sing of his grace, whose robe is the light, whose canopy space. His chariots of wrath the deep thunder clouds form, and dark is his path on the wings of the storm. Grand poetry, to be sure, but is that truly describing the Creator? Or have we somehow gotten confused that the destroyer, who is an enemy of the human race and of the Creator, and we're attributing what he does to the Creator? Now, I didn't get to look this up, but I do recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, John said something about In him is light, uh, and in him there is no darkness at all. So why is the poet saying that he has a dark path on the wings of the storm and have his wrath creating the great thunderclouds? Thunderclouds and storms are all a result of imbalance in the climatic system that the Creator put on this planet. And that instability does draw on the power of the Creator, the power that the Creator made available on this planet to support life. But it's a misuse of that power, and it is not the Creator's will that that power should express itself in the ways that the enemy of God and humanity has found ways to make it work. And so while it sounds poetically wonderful to talk about God's power displayed in nature and the thunder clouds and the lightning and all these things, it is a philosophical misrepresentation to suggest that that's how the Creator works. How can you talk about his love and grace in one phrase and in the next phrase talk about his wrath and the thunderclouds? Kind of reminds me of a computer game from years and years ago. There was a company called Infocom, and they produced a computer version of the Choose Your Own Adventure novel. And you may be familiar with Choose Your Own Adventure novels. You read to a certain point, and at the end of a page it says, if you want to do this, read to this page. If you choose to do this, turn to some other page. And then you follow that through and you make your choices as you go. And at some point you reach an end for your storyline. And then if you're interested, you go back, you try again, and reach another storyline. So this company would take written adventures and would give you essentially an open line to respond to the computer and to tell the computer what to do next. Go here, pick this thing up, manipulate this object, like maybe flip the switch so you can turn the lights on, or rebuild something so that you don't fall through the hole in the floor so you can go on to the next room, those kinds of things. Well, this company contacted a British author, one Douglas Adams, and my wife and I are both Douglas Adams fans of a sort, and we have some of his books here, and in fact, I seem to recall I read from one of them once, just to present some of his philosophical thinking and to muse on that. He had written what was essentially, it was a program for BBC Radio. It was called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he wrote this up, and then the BBC hired a bunch of voice actors to produce, and then they brought in the sound effects people, and they produced this big multi-episode story of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, they decided to try and turn that into a game. Infocom did, that is. And they actually contacted Douglas Adams and got his input on things they could do. In the game, you wake up as Arthur Dent, that's one of the main characters of the story, and you're wearing a house robe, you're in your bedroom, and there's lint in your pocket, and one of the things that you have with you is no tea. Now, that's kind of a particularly British thing, that they would, drink tea instead of coffee. And the fact that you have no tea then, it actually becomes an object in the game that you can set down. And at some point through as you progress through the game, then it offers you the option to manipulate your spaceship to produce tea. But if you go to pick the tea up, a message comes up and says, your common sense tells you that you cannot have tea and no tea. So then you set down your no tea and you can pick up your tea. That's the way the game is programmed. Now, at another point in the game, from some other type of event I won't try to describe because it's complicated, you find yourself in some kind of a network and you come across a chip. And the chip is labeled sense, comma, common for Dent, comma, Arthur. Well, what's that all about? Well, the thing you're supposed to do to be able to finish the game is you're supposed to remove that chip from the network. So then when you come back in the main part of the game, you as Arthur Dent no longer have your common sense. So if you want to have tea and you go to pick up the no key, your common sense is not there to tell you you can't do it, and you are able to carry both tea and no tea. And that's critical because there's something that you have to do, that you have to convince a computer how smart and intelligent you are. And the way to convince the computer that you're intelligent enough to pass is you have to be able to hold both tea and no tea. Now, I bring all that up because I'm talking about the juxtaposition of ideas in this hymn, "O Worship the King." We've talked about his wonderful love as his grace, and then the next thing you know, we're talking about his chariots of wrath, the deep thunderclouds forming, and dark is his path on the wings of the storm. Whereas a verse earlier, we were talking about how he was enthroned in splendor. And so we humans, in our sophistry, sometimes think that it's a demonstration of our heightened intelligence that we can hold these contradictory positions, which all goes to show that we're just not willing to accept that maybe our contradictory positions are contradictory because we've been told since we were little kids certain things are true and they're not. Quick question here. Yes, ma'am. Off? Well, it might be on Do Not Disturb. Okay, I see what the problem is. Pardon us here, I've got to take a moment. This phone, I'm not sure why, but it gets it a bee in its bonnet and it disconnects from our Wi-Fi, and we have very poor coverage where we live, and so and essentially all I had to do was turn the networking off and back on, and then now I should be able to get through here.
Hi.
Hi.
I like interactive fiction, not choose your own adventure.
Well, yeah, I wasn't saying that Infocom was choose your own adventure. I was saying that it was built around the concept of choose your own adventure books. Yes, the Infocom calls itself interactive fiction.
Yes. Interactive.
And if you're going to listen by phone, you might want to turn that off because of the delay.
Turn what off?
the audio that you're listening to in there.
Huh? Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear me a couple of dozen times over myself, like an echo?
Well, I don't know. I might, but I'm not sure everybody would. Anyway, so we have been reading out of the book of Job. I am hoping that we can get through the rest of Job's speech because we've gotten to the point where Job is speaking and he has a fairly lengthy speech to get through. And then we will get to Elihu. I'm hoping we can do that part tonight so that then next week we can get to what God has to say on the matter. Now, let me just make this comment before we officially get started. I did hear somebody talking this week, and he mentioned the book of Job. And he said the book of Job was about why bad things happen to good people, which is very accurate. And he talks about how Job and his friends struggled with this throughout the book. And at the end, God shows up and he says, I'm the creator. I can do whatever I like. You don't like it? Tough. And there are a lot of people who read the book of Job, and that's the message they come away with. God is arbitrary. God is in charge. Whatever happens, God does it. And you can't understand God, don't try to, and don't question him. But we're making the argument that that isn't the message of the book of Job, and hopefully next week when we get to what God does have to say, we'll read it and we'll try to make better sense of what's going on and come up with a different idea of what God tells Job about things. So, let's bow our heads and we'll get started with this evening's study. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you that you are a God of love and glory and light, and that in you there is no darkness at all. And we know that when we face dark things in this world, an enemy has done this. And we can trust and rely on you to see us through these difficult things. As we open the written word this evening, we want your Holy Spirit to help us understand and to see through the human model and get a clear glimpse of your character and your love and goodness and mercy. And give us then each person individually receive this blessing of the Spirit so that you can give each person just what they need at this moment. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now read my notes here and make that switch so that you can see what I'm reading. Job chapter 27. And I'm going to have to talk about this one once we read into it a little ways, because Job does something here that most of us are told we shouldn't do. Job continued speaking. I vow by the living God who has taken away my rights, by the Almighty who has embittered my soul. Well, we know it wasn't God who did it, but as of yet, Job hasn't quite picked that up. As long as I live, while I have breath from God, my lips will speak no evil, and my tongue will speak no lies. Now, that's commendable, a commitment to reality and truth. And that's essentially what Job is saying here. I'm making a commitment. I'm not going to say things just because I want them to be true. I'm going to make sure that what I speak comports with reality. I won't speak evil.
Times it will be true. And I know that's a fact because I heard it on Reddit.
Yeah, While I was at the doctor's office yesterday, I got a text. And the text said, if you repeat something 3 times, it comes true. And then it says, I am skinny, I am skinny, I am skinny. Wait till you get home. I was tempted to show that to the doctor, but I didn't. Anyway, Job makes a commitment here that his speech will comport with what is good and right, but also it will comport with reality. So he'll speak no evil, and by that he means he's not going to lie. I will never concede that you are right. I will defend my integrity until I die. I will maintain my innocence without wavering. My conscience is clear for as long as I live. Now, most of us have had it drummed into our heads for years that we should never claim that we are sinless. Of course, that's really addressing a different issue, because as long as we are on this world and we are surrounded by brokenness and broken people, we are surrounded by sin. Sin is a part of how we live. And, if you think of sin as something you do, eventually you're going to come to the point that, well, I haven't done anything wrong, therefore I'm sinless. But that's not what Job is saying here. He's not claiming sinlessness. He's saying he's innocent and that his conscience is clear. Now, the people who teach utter depravity of man teach that no human can be innocent. Well, Job apparently didn't believe that bit, because he's maintaining his innocence, and he says, my conscience is clear for as long as I live. Sinlessness is not attainable for humans while on this planet. But a clear conscience is. Innocence is. If we make a commitment to reality and truth, and if we then stick by that, then we have integrity and a clear conscience that we can fall back on. And that's not claiming sinless perfection, that's just claiming innocence. When you understand the difference between sin is something I do and sin as a condition of separation from the Creator, then until we live in the presence of God, as the book of Revelation promises we will, then we are still at some level living in sin, because we are not yet fully in his presence. Job continues, may my enemy be punished like the wicked, my adversary like those who do evil. For what hope do the godless have when God cuts them off and takes away their life? Will God listen to their cry when trouble comes upon them? Can they take delight in the Almighty? Can they call to God at any time? Well, actually, yes, they can, but rhetorically here, Job is suggesting that because they are evil, they can't. Of course, we know, because we understand God's character, that the barrier between them and God isn't on God's part, it's on their part. It's not that they can't call to God, it's that because of their pride, they won't call to God. I will teach you about God's power. I will not conceal anything concerning the Almighty. But you have seen all this, yet you say all these useless things to me. This is what the wicked will receive from God. This is their inheritance from the Almighty. They may have many children, but the children will die in war, starve to death. Those who survive will die of a plague, and not even their widows will mourn them. Evil people may have piles of money and may store away mounds of clothing, but the righteous will wear that clothing, and the innocent will divide that money. The wicked build houses as fragile as a spider's web, as flimsy as a shelter made of branches. The wicked go to bed rich, but wake to find that all their wealth is gone. And again here, we have to understand that Job is speaking from an eternal perspective, not from a temporal, world-based perspective. Because wickedness is its own punishment and will, when God sees that the time is right, cease to exist strictly because it is not compatible with life. By the way, there's a footnote there. They build houses as fragile as a moth, is what the Hebrew says. The Greek and Syriac get that spider's web. And that may be based on a misunderstanding of the ancients about what a spider's web was and how it worked. Because the material that the spider produces to make its web is frail as we think of it, simply because of how tiny and thin it is. That if we were to make material that strong and make it as big as we're used to it, it would be unbreakable. So spider's web isn't fragile. And that's why maybe the Greek and Syriac versions are maybe a little bit questionable, because the moth, as you know, has very fragile wings, and if there's any physical force applied to them, the covering of the wing just falls off. So that is fragile. Yeah. Terror overwhelms them, that is the wicked, like a flood, and they are blown away in the storms of the night. The east wind carries them away, and they are gone. It sweeps them away. It whirls down on them without mercy. They struggle to flee from its power, but everyone jeers at them and mocks them. And again, we read this and we say, well, now Job's just saying the same things that his friends are saying, because they've been saying this. And it is perhaps a bit ironic that he's using this bit about the wind, because it was a windstorm that knocked down the house where his children lived and that killed them. Now he's talking about, well, this is what happens to the wicked people. And yet he's maintaining his own innocence. Next chapter. People know where to mine silver and how to refine gold. They know where to dig iron from the earth and how to smelt copper from rock. They know how to shine light in the darkness and explore the farthest regions of the earth. As they search in the dark for ore, they sink a mine shaft into the earth, far from where anyone lives. They descend on ropes, swinging back and forth. Food is grown on the earth above, but down below the earth is melted as by fire. Here the rocks contain precious lapis lazuli, and the dust contains gold. These are treasures no bird of prey can see, no falcon's eye observe. No wild animal has walked upon these treasures, no lion has ever set his paw there. Now, those who believe in a literal global flood suggest that all this stuff being under the earth is a result of the catastrophic upset of the planet at the time of the flood, and that these things, these precious stones and these minerals, were all on the surface of the earth, available readily to humanity, and that now that the flood has come, we have to dig holes in the earth in order to get to this. People know how to tear apart flinty rocks and overturn the roots of mountains. They cut tunnels in the rocks and uncover precious stones. They dam up the trickling streams and bring to light the hidden treasures. So, to an extent here, now, Job sings humanity's praises. We've learned how to do all these things. We've learned how to cut holes in the rocks and dig into the earth and find these hidden treasures. Well, he's not saying that just to praise humanity. He's saying that to make a point. And here's his point. It's verse 12. But do people know where to find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? No one knows where to find it, for it is not found among the living. Footnote A. As in the Greek version, the Hebrew reads, knows its value. All right? No one knows its value. I like that better, actually. For it is not found among the living. It is not here, says the ocean, nor is it here, says the sea. It cannot be bought with gold. It cannot be purchased with silver. It's worth more than all the gold of Ophir, greater than the precious onyx or lapis lazuli. Wisdom is more valuable than gold and crystal. It cannot be purchased with jewels mounted in fine gold. Now, all you have to do in our day is to pay attention to what's going on in the world and look at some of the world's richest people and realize that they may have wealth, but they don't necessarily have wisdom. And their wealth can't buy it for them. Coral and jasper are worthless in trying to get it. The price of wisdom is far above rubies. Precious peridot from Ethiopia cannot be exchanged for it. It's worth more than the purest gold. And footnote B is going to tell us that the Hebrew says Cush. Right. It's worth more than the purest gold. But do people know where to find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all humanity. Even the sharp-eyed birds in the sky cannot discover it. Destruction and death, that's probably Sheol. Oh, Abaddon. Oh, all right. Abaddon, or destruction, and death say, we've only heard rumors of where wisdom can be found. God alone understands the way to wisdom. He knows where it can be found, for he looks throughout the whole earth, and he sees everything under the heavens. He decided how hard the wind should blow and how much rain should fall. He made the laws for the rain and laid out a path for the lightning. Then he saw wisdom and evaluated it. He set it in place and examined it thoroughly. And this is what he says to all humanity. The fear of the Lord is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding. And these thoughts, these approaches, these philosophical ideas would last from the time of Job and will find themselves new expression in the book of Proverbs. We'll have time to ponder that when we get to the book of Proverbs, because it says a lot of the same kinds of things, and it also comes to this conclusion. The fear of the Lord is true wisdom, and to forsake evil is real understanding. You see, wisdom is nothing more than changing our ideas to comport with reality. Understanding the ability to make wise choices is founded in subjecting our ideology to reality instead of trying to subject reality to our ideology. And the ultimate reality of the universe is the creator of the universe. So if we want our ideas to comport with reality, What they need to do is to comport with and properly understand the Creator of all things. The fear of the Lord, fear is probably a bad word to use there, but reverence for, respect for, believing the truth about God is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding. And forsaking evil just simply means escaping the survival mechanisms that we grew up with and beginning to live our lives by love, which we sometimes in this group call kingdom living. Job continued speaking. I long for the years gone by when God took care of me, when he lit up the way before me and I walked safely through the darkness. When I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me, and my children were around me. My steps were awash in cream, and the rocks gushed olive oil for me. Those were the days when I went to the city gate and took my place among the honored leaders. The young stepped aside when they saw me, and even the aged rose in respect at my coming. Well, if he was the king, of course they would. The princes stood in silence and put their hands over their mouths. The highest officials of the city stood quietly, holding their tongues in respect. All who heard me praised me. All who saw me spoke well of me. For I assisted the poor in their need and the orphans who required help. I helped those without hope, and they blessed me. And I caused the widows' hearts to sing for joy. Everything I did was honest. Righteousness covered me like a robe, and I wore justice like a turban. There's the link that's found elsewhere in Hebrew poetry between righteousness and justice. Justice that is not also righteous isn't justice at all. I served as eyes for the blind and feet for the lame. I was a father to the poor and assisted strangers who needed help. I broke the jaws of godless oppressors and plucked their victims from their teeth. I thought, surely I will die surrounded by my family after a long, good life. For after I have counted my days like sand, is what the footnote tells us. For I am like a tree whose roots reach the water, whose branches are refreshed with the dew. New honors are constantly bestowed on me, and my strength is continually renewed, which makes us think of the passages in Psalm 1 and again in Jeremiah of the tree planted by rivers of water. Everyone listened to my advice. They were silent as they waited for me to speak, and after I spoke, they had nothing to add, for my counsel satisfied them. They longed for me to speak, as people long for rain. They drank my words like a refreshing spring rain. When they were discouraged, I smiled at them. My look of approval was precious to them. Like a chief, I told them what to do. I lived like a king among his troops and comforted those who mourned. So this chapter is Job reminiscing on the life he had before disaster overtook him. And I mean, that's just it. It's just essentially 25 verses of Job reminiscing about the good old days. Job 30. Now he gets to talk about the reality of what's going on around him. But now I am mocked by people younger than I, by young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with my sheepdogs. A lot of good they are to me, those worn out wretches. They are gaunt from poverty and hunger. They claw the dry ground in desolate wastelands. They pluck wild greens from among the bushes and eat from the roots of broom trees. That's interesting. Do you know anything about broom trees? I'm asking my wife. Her dad used to run a broom factory.
Well, no, I don't.
Okay, well, I'm just Just wondering.
Dad, for a large portions of his adult life, he worked in a broom factory. Um, I know he was responsible for making the brooms, and I know he was responsible for running the shops, and which involved ordering it, the supplies, which they call broom corn.
Mm-hmm.
But I anything about it.
I mean, what we use in a broom is essentially the fibers and stalks of a plant in the old days. Nowadays, everything's synthetic, but you can still, I think you can still find and buy actual brooms made from broom corn. At any rate, I can't imagine that the roots of that would be all that succulent or edible. They are driven from human society, and people shout at them as if they were thieves. So now they live in frightening ravines and in caves and among the rocks. They sound like animals howling among the bushes, huddled together beneath the nettles. They are nameless fools, outcasts from society. Now, these people are sitting there listening to him, and he's saying this about them in their presence. They have gotten him upset, and he's willing to say things like this to them while they're sitting there watching him. And now they mock me with vulgar songs. They taunt me. They despise me and won't come near me, except to spit in my face. For God has cut my bowstring. He has humbled me. So they have thrown off all restraint. These outcasts oppose me to my face. They send me sprawling and lay traps in my path. They block my road and do everything they can to destroy me. They know I have no one to help me. They come at me from all directions. They jump on me when I am down, and that's human nature, by the way. In order to make ourselves feel powerful, we have a tendency amongst us to double down on somebody when they're down, because that's an easy way to feel powerful. And so now that Job is down, all these people who are wanting to feel powerful are seeing him as a target they can use for their own personal pleasures. I live in terror now. My honor is blown away in the wind, and my prosperity has vanished like a cloud. And now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days. At night, my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I'm nothing more than dust and ashes. And by the way, footnote for Ed there, my garment is disfigured. How the Hebrew reads, they rendered it as in the Greek version. Okay. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel toward me. You use your power to persecute me. Now, recall, he's saying this. We know it's not God that's persecuting him, because we've read the part of the story that hasn't been explained to Job yet. But he's saying these things, and yet when the book is over, God says, Job spoke of me what is right. Well, we say, no, this isn't right. Well, no, but God allows it. When we don't see what it is, and we think that God's doing it to us, and we get angry at God because of what he does to us, well, God's big. He can take it. He doesn't take it personally. He lets us vent our frustrations. And if we make him our punching bag, he can take it. You were going to say something?
We don't understand.
What do you mean we don't understand?
We don't understand why we have to go through the trials that go through.
Well, yeah, that's true.
We don't know the end from the beginning, but God does. He knows why things happen the way that they happen and why people turn out the way they turn out. We don't. We should never sit in judgment of somebody else.
Well, like I say, I think when God allows Job to speak about him like this, even though what Job is saying isn't definitely true, I mean, ultimately true, it's his perception, and God lets him say what he says out of his perception, and he's big enough to take it and not take it personally, and to accept Job for what he does understand.
Well, last week you brought up that depression, that depressive episode I went through.
Right?
It left me disabled. It was so bad. And when I think back on it, I had lost sight of God's presence, and I just couldn't figure out what I had done that would cause God to turn his back on me like that, to let go and walk away from me.
And you had a preacher come through to tell you his version of why that was, which didn't help.
Out of your life, what are you doing? You've got to get rid of the sin in your life, which was absolutely nonsense. It was just making things worse.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that I decided that it didn't matter if God let go of me or not. I wasn't going to let go of him no matter what. That's when I was able to start healing. That's when I was anointed and was able to start eating again. And it was then that I was introduced to a different concept of God than what I had been raised with.
Mm-hmm.
And this new concept of God was so welcome. You know, there's no way God would have let me go through that alone. It's just a world of difference in what I learned and what the Bible is actually preaching versus what the church preaches.
Mm-hmm. And I hear in that shades of Jacob's experience.
Yeah, I do too. I will not let you go unless you bless me.
Right.
I mean, whether you bless me or not, I'm just not letting go.
Yeah. Verse 20. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel toward me. You use your power to persecute me. You throw me into the whirlwind and destroy me in the storm. And I know you are sending me to my death, the destination of all who live. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. Did I not weep for those in trouble? Was I not deeply grieved for the needy? So I looked for good, but evil came instead. I waited for the light, but darkness fell. And, as long as we live on this planet, in its current condition, yeah, that's going to be an occasional experience. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and cry for help. Instead, I am considered a brother to jackals and a companion to owls. My skin is turned dark, and my bones burn with fever. My harp plays sad music, and my flute accompanies those who weep. Strong metaphorical language being used here. One last chapter in this speech of Job. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look with lust at a young woman. For what has God above chosen for us? What is our inheritance from the Almighty on high? Isn't it calamity for the wicked and misfortune for those who do evil? Doesn't he see everything I do and every step I take? Have I lied to anyone or deceived anyone? Let God weigh me on the scales of justice, for he knows my integrity. If I have strayed from his pathway, or if my heart has lusted for what my eyes have seen, or if I am guilty of any other sin, then let someone else eat the crops I have planted. Let all that I have planted be uprooted. If my heart has been seduced by a woman, or if I have lusted for my neighbor's wife, then let my wife serve another man. Let other men sleep with her. Footnote there under serve, grind for. Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. For lust is a shameful sin, a crime that should be punished. It is a fire that burns all the way to the grave, Sheol. No, to Abaddon again. Interesting. Burns all the way to destruction. They're using the term hell here, but Abaddon means destruction. It would wipe out everything I own. If I have been unfair to my male or female servants when they have brought their complaints to me, how could I face God? What could I say when he questioned me? For God created both me and my servants. He created us both in the womb. And in saying that, Job is recognizing and stating the fundamental equality of all humans before their creator. God created me, he created you. Ultimately, we're not different. You know, the conditions of this world may have put us in different situations and made us look unequal. But with God, we are equal. Have I refused to help the poor or crushed the hopes of widows? Have I been stingy with my food and refused to share it with orphans? No. From childhood, I have cared for orphans like a father, and all my life I have cared for widows. Whenever I saw the homeless without clothes and the needy with nothing to wear, did they not praise me for providing wool clothing to keep them warm? If I raised my hand against an orphan, knowing the judges would take my side, then let my shoulder be wrenched out of place. Let my arm be torn from its socket. That would be better than facing God's judgment. For if the majesty of God opposes me, what hope is there? Have I put my trust in money or felt secure because of my gold? Have I gloated about my wealth and all that I own? And recall, he was a very wealthy man up to this point. Have I looked at the sun shining in the skies or the moon walking down its silver pathway, and been secretly enticed in my heart to throw kisses at them in worship? If so, I should be punished by the judges, for it would mean I had denied the God of heaven. Have I ever rejoiced when disaster struck my enemies, or become excited when harm came their way? No, I have never sinned by cursing anyone or by asking for revenge. My servants have never said, "He let others go hungry." I have never turned away a stranger, but have opened my doors to everyone. Have I tried to hide my sins like other people do, concealing my guilt in my heart? It's a very human thing, by the way. Have I feared the crowd or the contempt of the masses, so that I kept quiet and stayed indoors? If only someone would listen to me. Look, I will sign my name to my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser write out the charges against me. I would face the accusation proudly. I would wear it like a crown. For I would tell him exactly what I have done. I would come before him like a prince. Who is his accuser? Well, it's not the Almighty. It's not the Creator. We know that the person revealed at the start of this book is the accuser, and he has done exactly what his name says he does. He has accused. He has accused Job, and no, he hasn't written it down where Job can know, because he doesn't want Job to know. He wants to overthrow Job, and if Job knows it's going to be harder to overthrow him. So the liar, the concealer, that's the person that Job is facing. If my land accuses me and all its furrows cry out together, or if I have stolen its crops or murdered its owners, then let thistles grow on that land instead of wheat, and weeds instead of barley. Job's words are here ended. So again, he has maintained his innocence until the end. He has perhaps wrongfully accused God of causing his troubles. But God's okay with that, even though it's not true, because he knows we don't always understand things the way we should. Job's three friends refused to reply further to him because he kept insisting on his innocence. And that was a reality that they could not bring their ideology to fit. They didn't have an ideology that allowed Job, in his current miserable condition, to be innocent. How could the innocent suffer like this? It didn't fit. It didn't match their ideology. So at some point, they give up. There's no convincing this guy of the lies we have chosen to believe in, so we'll just keep silent. Then Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite of the clan of Ram, became angry. He was angry because Job refused to admit that he had sinned and that God was right in punishing him, Elihu's view. He was also angry with Job's three friends, for they made God appear to be wrong by their inability to answer Job's arguments. Footnote A, as in an ancient Hebrew scribal tradition, the Masoretic text reads Job. Interesting. Elihu had waited for the others to speak to Job because they were older than he. But when he saw that they had no further reply, he spoke out angrily. Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, said, I am young and you are old, so I held back from telling you what I think. I thought those who were older should speak, for wisdom comes with age. Well, yeah, wisdom does come with age, but only to those who are open to it. If you cling to your ideology, you can be as old as the hills and twice as dusty, but you never open your brain to receive wisdom, so then wisdom does not come with age. But there is a spirit within people, the breath of the Almighty within them, that makes them intelligent. Footnote B. or spirit, capital S. In other words, they're allowing that it could be that we're speaking of the Holy Spirit here, not just a spirit. However, when he says the breath of the Almighty within them, we understand, as it says in the book of Genesis, where it talks the second time around about humanity's creation, that God formed man of the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath or spirit of life, and man became a living soul. It is that power of life that makes humanity intelligent. God provided us with intelligence, and then he left it up to us to use it. The local school district once had a sign out: knowledge dispensed daily. Bring your own container. All right, God has created us, and he's given us life, and he's given us mental processes that our technology can't yet fully explain. How does a human have free will? Because we can't build something that mimics human intelligence that actually has free will. We can mimic it, but we can't actually produce it. So how could God do it? But there it is. There is a spirit within people, the breath of the Almighty within them, that makes them intelligent. Sometimes the elders are not wise. Sometimes the aged do not understand justice. So, listen to me, and let me tell you what I think. I have waited all this time, listening very carefully to your arguments, listening to you grope for words. I have listened, but not one of you has refuted Job or answered his arguments. And don't tell me he is too wise for us. Only God can convince him. If Job had been arguing with me, I would not answer with your kind of logic. You sit there baffled with nothing more to say. Should I continue to wait now that you are silent? Must I also remain silent? Sorry, but my nose is just driving me nuts tonight. No, I will say my piece. I will speak my mind, for I am full of pent-up words, and the spirit within me urges me on. I'm like a cask of wine without a vent, like a new wineskin ready to burst. I must speak to find relief, so let me give my answers. I won't play favorites or try to flatter anyone, for if I tried flattery, my Creator would soon destroy me. Now, he's talking like he's going to come up with something that the three men who have already spoken a whole bunch haven't said. He's going to come up with a line of logic that will convict Job and convince him to admit that he had done something wrong to earn what had happened to him. As we read it, I'll let you decide if he in fact had what he's here boasting so much about having. Does he really have a new answer for Job? Listen to my words, Job. Pay attention to what I have to say. Now that I have begun to speak, let me continue. I speak with all sincerity. I speak the truth. For the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. That's not a basis for you to think that you're any better than anybody else on this planet. Yes, the Spirit of God has made us. The breath of the Almighty gives us life, but that's true for every living human being out there. Doesn't make you any better than anybody else.
Certain piece of anatomy.
Can you say that again? I don't think they picked up what you said, and I wonder if they understand what you're saying.
What was it you just said?
I forgot already. I was saying that what's true, this statement that the Spirit of God has made me and the breath of the Almighty gives me life, that's true for every living human being.
Well, you also implied that God looks at everybody equally.
I have implied that.
And I said that includes those who were not endowed with a certain piece of flesh.
It does, yes. Verse 5. Answer me if you can. Make your case and take your stand. Look, you and I both belong to God. I too was formed from clay. So you don't need to be afraid of me. I won't come down hard on you. Except I have a sense that's exactly what he's about to do. You have spoken in my hearing, and I have heard your words. You said, I am pure, I am without sin, I am innocent, I have no guilt. Well, I don't know that he said he was without sin, but he did say he was innocent. God is picking a quarrel with me, and he considers me his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks and watches my every move. But you are wrong, and I will show you why. For God is greater than any human being. So why are you bringing a charge against him? Well, the point we have made is that it is because God is so great that he lets us blame us for things that aren't his fault. He is bigger than all of this. He is God. He can take it. He won't hold it against us when we vent our frustration about what's going on. And so he accepts Job's intention, even if some of his words seem to condemn God. Why say he does not respond to people's complaints?
Because he doesn't do it the way we want it done.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, why might Job say that God doesn't respond to people's complaints? Maybe that's because Job has committed himself to reality, and he has seen that sometimes people complain and they don't get an answer, at least not one that they expect. For God speaks again and again, though people do not recognize it. He speaks in dreams, in visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they lie in their beds. He whispers in their ears and terrifies them with warnings. He makes them turn from doing wrong. He keeps them from pride. Now let's just think about verse 17 there for a moment. And let's examine the logic and see if it stands up. He talks about God speaking to people though they don't recognize it. He whispers in their ears and terrifies them with warnings. He makes them, Elihu says, turn from doing wrong. He keeps them from pride. Well, if that were true, then nobody would do wrong. Nobody would be full of inappropriate pride, because God would have turned them away from it. He would have made them stop. So Elihu might say this, he might think it's true, but it doesn't comport with reality. God does not turn people from doing wrong. We know that because people consistently out there around us do wrong all the time. And people are full of pride and over confidence in themselves and their own rightness. He protects them from the grave, from crossing over the river of death. Or God disciplines people with pain on their sick beds, with ceaseless aching in their bones. Now, I think I mentioned that I did go do my annual wellness visit with a doctor yesterday. And while I was there, they gave me the annual flu shot, and they gave me a pneumonia vaccine. So both my arms are sore. as I was sleeping since then, uh, I have a tendency to change position if I wake up a little bit to help me get back to sleep. So maybe I'm laying on my back, I'll wake up, stir a little bit, I'll roll over on one side and go to sleep that way for a while. And then maybe I'll wake up, I'll go roll over on the other side. Well, I kept trying that last night, but it wasn't working because when I got on my side, the pressure was on my sore arm, and I would have to roll back onto my back. Now,
Well, maybe we could apply the capsaicin technique. Bring me your arm and I'll punch it. And then it'll hurt so bad you won't notice that it's sore.
well, I bring that up to cast doubt on this statement here. Or God disciplines people with pain on their sick beds, with ceaseless aching in their bones. Is the soreness of my arms right now God's discipline? Or is it just the natural result of me taking steps to prevent a worse thing from happening in my future? In other words, deal with the minor aches and pains in my arms and the sick feeling that I've got here, because that will prevent me later in the winter from coming down with the flu or pneumonia, which would be considerably more problematic than just a little aching in my arms. So I think we have the capability to understand that sickness and pain are not necessarily God's discipline. In fact, they're not God's discipline. That's just life on a broken planet. They lose their appetite for even the most delicious food. Their flesh wastes away and their bones stick out. They are at death's door. The angels of death wait for them. But if an angel from heaven appears, a special messenger to intercede for a person, and declare that he is upright, he will be gracious and say, "Rescue him from the grave, for I have found a ransom for his life." Then his body will become as healthy as a child's, firm and youthful again. When he prays to God, he will be accepted, and God will receive him with joy and restore him to good standing. Now, there's an extent to where what Elihu says here is true. But he's acting like as if this is somehow proof that Job hasn't gotten right with God, because if Job had gotten right with God, all these things would have happened to him. He would have prayed to God, he would have been accepted, God would have restored him to good standing. It's obvious, we can tell by looking, he's not there now, so Job hasn't done what he was supposed to do. He will declare to his friends, "I sinned and twisted the truth, but it was not worth it. God rescued me from the grave, and now my life is filled with light." Footnote A, the Greek version reads, "But he did not punish me as my sin deserved." Yeah, we can imagine the Greek version saying something like that. Yes, God does these things again and again for people. He rescues them from the grave so that they may enjoy the light of life. Mark this well, Job. Listen to me, for I have more to say. But if you have anything to say, go ahead, speak, for I'm anxious to see you justified. But if not, then listen to me. Keep silent, and I will teach you wisdom. He wasn't listening, was he? When Job gave that little speech about wisdom, how you can't buy it for gold, he arrogantly says, "Shut up, Job, let me teach you some wisdom." I'm not sure he had any to depart, but impart is the word I wanted.
Is there something about some kind of saying about a man who is wise in his own eyes? If there's not a saying, there ought to be.
Let me see here. Where is their search tool? There we go, right there, the little icon. Okay, where do I type in my search? Oh. Well, I did a search, wise in his own eyes. It didn't come up with anything, but it did suggest Proverbs 3, 7 through 12. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce, and so on.
Well, maybe we should make it up then. He, in his own eyes, has the wisdom of a turkey.
Okay, we had just reached the end of this chapter 33. And at verse 33, he says, if not, then listen to me, keep silent, and I will teach you wisdom. I think we have time for one more chapter here. Then Elihu said, listen to me, you wise men. Pay attention, you who have knowledge. Job said, the ear tests the words it hears, just as the mouth distinguishes between foods. So, let us discern for ourselves what is right. No, you don't get to decide what is right. Right is right. Whatever you think about it has nothing to do with it. Let us learn together what is good. For Job also said, I am innocent, but God has taken away my rights. I am innocent, but they call me a liar. My suffering is incurable, though I have not sinned. Tell me, has there ever been a man like
Well,
Job?
I knew a man who was always right. We lived next door to him.
And
He was always right.
so,
He was never wrong. He was always right, Mr. Right.
somehow I don't think he was as right as he thought he was.
It was his name.
Oh, all right.
He was always right. He made a joke out of it. I'm always right because, he was Mr. Right.
Yeah. Was that R-I-G-H-T or W-R-I-G-H-T?
W.
Ah. Tell me, has there ever been a man like Job with his thirst for irreverent talk? Well, they called it that because they didn't understand what Job was saying. They had not reached his level of moral maturity, of we call it moral, the stages of moral development. They hadn't reached where he was, so what he said sounded like nonsense to them, and they called it irreverent talk. He chooses evil people as companions. He spends his time with wicked men. He's even said, why waste time trying to please God? Well, we make the point in this that our relationship with God is not transactional. We are not pleasing God in order to get something from Him. We are pleasing God because what pleases God is when we live the best life that we can live. And that means we have to live according to the design, the life design for the universe, which the Creator prepared in advance for us to do. But we don't do that to please God. It pleases God when we do that because He wants us to have the good things that result from it. but it's not transactional. We're not pleasing God in order to get something out of Him, although Elihu here seems to think that when he says what he said here in verse 9. He's even said, why waste time trying to please God? Well, if you're just trying to please God to get something out of Him, it is a waste of time. Yeah, so why bother? Listen to me, you who have understanding. Everyone knows that God doesn't sin. Yeah, okay, so what? God doesn't sin. What does that mean? How does that support your out of touch with reality thinking? It doesn't, but he thinks it does. The Almighty can do no wrong. He repays people according to their deeds. He treats people as they deserve, except that we know He doesn't always. Truly, God will not do wrong. The Almighty will not twist justice. No, but He might allow other people to twist it. He might allow the enemy of humanity to twist it. Yeah, that might happen. That does happen on a regular basis. It's not God doing it. So just because you say God won't do wrong, the Almighty will not twist justice, that doesn't mean that justice won't get twisted. Did someone else put the world in His care? Who set the whole world in place? If God were to take back His Spirit and withdraw His breath, all life would cease and humanity would turn again to dust. Well, exactly right. Are you now saying that all humanity is good because it's from the breath of God? Therefore, God doesn't sin, He doesn't make any mistakes. Therefore, everybody's right. Whatever they do is good and right. Is that what you're saying, Elihu? I don't think so, but you haven't thought through what you're saying. You're just saying because you think you can say these obvious truths and somehow this will convince Job of something they hadn't convinced him of before. I don't follow his logic. Now, listen to me if you are wise. Pay attention to what I say. Could God govern if He hated justice? Well, nobody's saying God hates justice. God is justice in person. Not the justice we imagine, but actual justice. And He makes a mistake by assuming that God's here to govern. Could God govern if He hated justice? Well, could God govern if He loved justice? Because if He loved justice, He'd know that He created us to be free. And if we're free, then we're not being governed, and if we're, except by ourselves, and if we're not being governed and He's not doing it, are you going to condemn the Almighty Judge? For He says to kings who are wicked and to nobles, you are unjust. He doesn't care how great a person may be, and He pays no more attention to the rich than to the poor. He made them all. In a moment they die, in the middle of the night they pass away. The mighty are removed without human hand. Now, again, when we look at the words He's saying here and the statements He's making, yeah, these are all obviously true. But you're just spouting platitudes here, dude. What's the point? How are you proving that Job is wrong by spouting all these obvious platitudes? For God watches how people live. He sees everything they do. No darkness is thick enough to hide the wicked from His eyes. We don't set the time when we will come before God in judgment. He brings the mighty to ruin without asking anyone, and He sets up others in their place. He knows what they do, and in the night He overturns and destroys them. He strikes them down because they are wicked, doing it openly for all to see. Pardon me, I gotta take a moment here. I'll be right back.
Sounds like it's time for me to start singing for you. So I'm better at being smart.
And I put a little lotion on my nose. Maybe it'll quit itching so badly. Okay, where'd we leave off? Verse 25, I think, is where we quit. He knows what they do. He's talking about the mighty. And in the night he overturns and destroys them. He strikes them down because they are wicked, doing it openly for all to see. Now he's succumbing, Elihu here is succumbing to all the misunderstandings about the Creator that were common in his day. So he's repeating all the tried and true, quote, tried and true wisdom of his age that, you mess up, God's going to zap you. He strikes them down because they are wicked, doing it openly for all to see, for they turned away from following him. They have no respect for any of his ways. They cause the poor to cry out, catching God's attention. He hears the cries of the needy, but if he chooses to remain quiet, who can criticize him? When he hides his face, no one can find him, whether an individual or a nation. He prevents the godless from ruling. I would disagree with that. So they cannot be a snare to the people. Well, in that case, everybody who's in power is good, and when they go to war, they're both good. It's good versus good. Dude, did you ever go to school and learn logic? Anyway.
Not at school.
Why don't people say to God, I have sinned, but I will sin no more? Or, I don't know what evil I have done. Tell me. If I have done wrong, I will stop at once. Must God tailor his justice to your demands? But you have rejected him. The choice is yours, not mine. Go ahead, share your wisdom with us. After all, bright people will tell me, and wise people will hear me say, Job speaks out of ignorance. His words lack insight. Job, you deserve the maximum penalty for the wicked way you have talked. For you have added rebellion to your sin. You show no respect, and you speak many angry words against God. Well, that's his view. When God shows up, Job's going to repent. And then God is going to say, well, Job, you said what was right, but your friends didn't. So this verse 37 here sounds like unwarranted hubris on the part of Elihu.
Okay, that's a word I keep hearing, and I keep asking you
Yeah.
what it means. And you keep telling me what it means, but I have a little block. What does that word mean? I don't remember. I've heard it a gazillion times, but I can't remember what it means.
Well, essentially it means arrogance.
Okay.
A very powerful sense that you're right and anybody who disagrees with you is therefore wrong.
So my neighbor was Mr. Hubris. Not really. He really was right. Oh.
I'm wanting to look something up here. We're about done. Our time is about out. Now this is interesting. Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite of the clan of Ram. So I looked up Ram in the Bible dictionary. A son of Hezron and the father of Aminadab, born in Egypt after Jacob's migration there. He is called Aram in the Authorized Version, but Ram in the Revised Version, and Arni in the Revised Version of Luke. Number 3 is one of the kindred of Elihu, Job 32:2. Ewald identified this ram with Aram in Genesis 22:21, but Aram is not a descendant of Buz, but a nephew, and the name is not the same in the Hebrew. So, who is this ram that he's talking about, and who is the Buz? Let's look up B-U-Z.
He owns a truck. Or
Buz,
he is.
1, the second son of Milcah and Nahor, Abraham's brother, I believe. Elihu the Buzite was probably a descendant of Buz, a name occurring in the genealogies of the tribe of Gad. First Chronicles, probably not the same one. So, my idea that Elihu might be Moses probably doesn't stand up to that analysis, that he was just somebody from outside the nation of Edom or of Esau who showed up, and because he was younger kept his mouth shut until everybody else couldn't find anything to say. So anyway, so we read through, let me go through here. And I think we ended there at the bottom of chapter 34. Let me look. Yeah, we entered at the end of chapter 34. So we will pick off at 35. Let's see, 35, more of Elihu. 36, more of Elihu. 37, I think, is more of Elihu. And then 38 and on, and there's only 42 chapters in the book. So there would be 5 chapters here for God to speak. Well, 4 for God to speak, and 1 for the coda, or the aftermath of things. So, yeah, we will be ready for Job chapter 35 next week. So, we've taken up all the time we had, and we're glad you could join us, and we do hope that you found something uplifting in what we had to say this evening. We invite you to join us next week, and until then, we say goodbye and God bless.
Right.